Hi, everyone. So, in today's interview, we're excited to welcome Alex Mannock, the host of the Airbnb Nomads Podcast. So, Alex, along with his business partner, Pooh, has built an impressive portfolio of 16 serviced accommodation units and 10 buy to let properties over the past 5 years. They then transitioned into an Airbnb consulting function or role away from the rent to rent model. And Alex has helped others optimize their listings while creating amazing lifestyles for themselves. So today we're going to discuss about Airbnb listings, how to make them successful, how to scale your business using his knowledge and his expertise, and how to basically make it happen in a very competitive short-term rental market. So welcome, Alex.
Hey, Akis, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. Good to see you.
You're welcome. So I think that I've prepared a few questions for you, but I think that we can start just by talking a bit about your background and what basically led you to be active in this space.
Yeah, so I guess I've led a bit of an unconventional life. I've spent kind of the majority of my adult life kind of traveling, living overseas, doing some kind of weird jobs. I was a scuba diving instructor for 12 years. And, that's when I kind of fell in love with this, the sun and the outdoor lifestyle and, chasing the good weather and kind of living that kind of life. And when I got to the end of that, I wanted to maintain that lifestyle, but I was really burnt out working with tourists because it can be quite difficult. So I moved into working on super yachts, and I spent another 10 years working on super yachts, which was again an amazing experience, seeing the world but on someone else's money, which was perfect. And again, great experiences. And then, yeah, even though as great as it was living that life, I still had a boss. I still had to ask for permission to come home for birthdays, for Christmases. It was a very last minute career where the boss would make his demands last minute, and we'd have to get the boat to Sardinia or to Mallorca or to somewhere else and cancel holiday plans and stuff like that. So that was really for me the time where I was like, okay, I need to get to more of a position where I'm in control of my own time, and that's what kind of led me to getting into property and specifically serviced accommodation.
Okay, quite a story. I actually didn't know this.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've had amazing experiences, even
Yeah.
though you didn't control your own schedule. So now, in terms of the Airbnb consultancy, I mean, controlling your time, there are many ways that one could, run, I don't know, an independent business or work in solo. What led you to that field specifically?
I think what I like about it, and we can get into this obviously a little bit deeper, but it's one of the few businesses that you can really systemize and bring in, automation, especially now with all the different platforms and technology. And it's never going to be 100% passive, right? It's very rare to do that unless you're I don't know, a best-selling author, or you come up with a world-changing invention, product. But for most of us, we have to put in some work. But I think for me and Pooh, my business partner, the idea was to get into something that we could streamline and get to a point where we was getting out of this money for time exchange trap, which for me is the golden ticket. If you can find a way of making money without physically needing to put your body somewhere, that kind of gives you access to a different way of living. So this for us kind of ticks those boxes.
Okay, makes sense. Makes sense. And now, in terms of the way that you work with people that potentially are just starting out or people that are thinking to start this, what, like, from a high level point of view, what do you help them do exactly?
Well, what we've found is that we work with a lot of people that are either just getting started or they're already in the business, but they haven't gone into it with enough of a plan. They've kind of, maybe they've gone off and they've done a training course and they've just gone out and they've taken on a property, mostly in the rent to rent space. But there's so many things at the front end that they haven't done in order to, build a real business. There's lots of things that are lacking. And again, we can get into it in a deeper way, but going right back to basic stuff like, who is their ideal target market? what kind of property do they need to secure to meet that target market? What does their area serve? What kind of market does it serve? And then there's all the other stuff from pricing to calendars to listing optimizations. And the other thing that we've realized that's lacking a lot in the kind of teaching space when people are learning this stuff is business and marketing. So a lot of people that are coming into this space, they're normally coming from an employee role. So they're not normally entrepreneurs with other business interests. They're normally coming from a job and they're trying to replace that job and get their time back. So they don't know how to run a business. That's the first thing. And then they're not getting taught all of the additional marketing skills that we now need to get consistently booked in this space. So we kind of help people mostly with those things.
Okay, that makes sense. And then in terms of the typical mistakes someone would make, especially as you say, if they come from an employee role and they just don't have the business DNA, the entrepreneurial DNA yet, what are the typical mistakes? Is it mostly on the selection side or is it on the operational side? So choosing the listing, the location, the property, or on running it?
I would say the biggest mistake that a lot of people make is, and it's not really their fault, it's what they're sold. And, we use this term a lot, that you don't know what you don't know. And I think a lot of people, they see stuff on social media and they go on the training courses and they're promised, this really kind of easy, get rich quick life. And when it doesn't happen, and a lot of people, they end up creating really more work and a lot of the time for less money because they're doing things backwards and upside down without really knowing what they're doing. And one of my guests on a previous podcast spoke about this, and he used a term that really hit home. And he said that he was in that place and he realized that all he'd done was replace shackles for shackles. So he took the shackles from his job and he took on a business. And the biggest difference was that you can never put those shackles down, right? They're with you all day, all night, in bed, on the weekends. So I think for most people, it's going into it with your eyes open, realizing that you're going to become a business owner. And that does come with a lot more responsibility and sacrifice, at least at the beginning, until you get going. So I think having that understanding is just one of the biggest mistakes we see.
Okay, that makes sense. And now in terms of the selection of the property, so we work in this space. Obviously, we see lots of different approaches, strategies. Now I've heard the story on another podcast from someone who launched a property in Texas. They just did a partnership with an Instagram influencer. They paid them $900 and they just completely booked their calendar for the next 18 months with just one paid post. So there are those like outlier events, but like what are the typical strategies that you should focus on for growth, for marketing, for evaluating, for structuring, like, and be able to predict the growth that you're going to have on each listing?
Okay, so if we're talking specifically about, are we talking about specifically what kind of properties we should be searching for?
So it's a mix. So it's like, where are the trends in terms of building demand and how you should think about selecting properties in relation to those trends, because obviously things are evolving. So things are not the same as they were 5 years ago. So I don't know if that makes sense.
I think that, what you just referred to with, having an influencer stand in your property, I think it's something that it's not something we've done personally. I'm sure it can work, but I would imagine that's a lot more targeted at the US market. I think in the UK, and at least what we do and who we work with, our clients are, a lot more contractor and corporate based. So we don't really tend to work with the leisure market because for a few different reasons. One, it's a lot more work. Their expectations are a lot higher with regards to, not expectations. All of our clients, expect quality properties, and that's what we supply, and that's what everyone should supply. But what I mean by that is that, let's say that a contractor gets in the shower and there's a hair on the wall, right? A contractor's not normally or generally going to start jumping up and down and start complaining, whereas maybe the leisure market might, right? And so that, we don't tend to deal with the leisure market as much. Also in the UK specifically, we just don't have the seasons and that kind of year-round leisure market to really depend on that. So then you're getting into a whole different market. So, we rely more on corporate and contractor clients. That's who we serve. And it's also much easier to market to, because if you're dealing with, let's say that you're dealing with contractors outside of just relying on Airbnb and booking.com, we know where to go to find those clients. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the recording, but we know where those clients are. We know how to go and find them specifically. There's a very clear route of where they are. Whereas with the leisure market, who is it? They could be anyone, they could be anywhere. So then you're looking at pouring a lot of money into paid ads and stuff like that, which, excuse me, if you're in the rent to rent space, you've got a lot of outgoings already. And then you want to add on to that, constant paid ads on Facebook and Instagram, that can add up pretty quick. So
that makes sense. So I guess that,
excuse me.
Yeah, no worries. So the growth strategies, marketing, sales strategies, they all have to do with who you're creating the properties for. And so I guess that comes back to what you mentioned at the beginning. So first identify your target audience and then choose the corresponding listings that would serve that audience. So do you have a specific way to do that, like an approach, or is it more, I don't know, based on experience?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to the last question, again, with our markets and you've got a very large audience all over the world and different, they're serving all different types of clients. But for us, again, one of the benefits, and for anyone listening to this who's just starting out and thinking about, who do they want to start working with, something else to consider is with the contractor and corporate market, or the workers market, the relocation market, the insurance market, these people are always going to need accommodation. So it's a lot less tied to the economy. Whereas if you're purely based, let's say you're going out and you're sourcing properties on the coast or in purely tourist hotspots, and you're just focusing on leisure guests, if the economy gets squeezed, or if things change, staycation travel can be one of the first thing that gets hit. Whereas, contractors, corporates, the work's going to carry on going, right? So it's just another reason why we think that that's a stronger market. But when it comes to what properties to source, I could sit here and say, oh, we need to do this spreadsheet and do that analysis and, tick all these boxes. But the truth is, and we could do that and fluff it up and try and make it a super overcomplicated thing. But really, it's just a matter of, where do you live? We always say that you should, whether you're taking on rent to rents or whether you're managing, you should try and keep it within a 30-minute radius of where you live. And we're really hot on that. And you'll see on social media people that are trying to sell courses, most likely talking about, I've got one in Bali and I've got one in Sydney and I've got one in Tokyo, and I just travel the world and stay in my Airbnbs. Is that realistic? Maybe some people can do it, but it probably comes with a lot of stress and work and hassle and risk, because, you've got to rely on people that you don't know. You've got to rely on places that you don't know, and demographics of people that live there that you don't know. Whereas if you stick to where you live, 30 minutes around where you live, the streets, the clientele, the industries, the attractions, the universities, the schools, the hospitals, so if you're going to do that, if you stay within the 30 minutes of where you live, that area that you know really well, you're going to know, okay, I'm in a city center location. There's a lot of corporate travel. There's a lot of banks, for example. You're going to know that your target market should probably be corporate workers, temporary working contracts. Maybe you've got universities there as well. So maybe you'll be serving university staff or families that are coming to stay because of that university, if that's the main attraction in your area. Or maybe you've got a ton of development work going on, loads of building sites, loads of construction. So then you know that that's going to be your client market. And when you've done that, and once you've looked around and driven around and really, got your boots on the ground, then you can start to go out and match properties to your ideal avatar, really. And, that's pretty straightforward. If they're corporates, what are they going to be looking for? If it's in city center, they're going to want, nice light apartments with super fast Wi-Fi. Maybe a lot of the time they're going to be maybe working from home. So making sure that they've got their desks in there and all that kind of, good working from home stuff. Is transport going to be important? Does it need to be near, transport stops? Contractors, they're going to want kind of bigger houses, with driveway parking for the vans so that they can be safely secure close to the house. They want that convenience of driveway parking. Obviously, bigger spaces so that they can stay in groups, and it's a lot more cost effective for the employer. So it's actually quite easy once you narrow it down to who your ideal avatar client market is.
That makes sense. That was very detailed response, and thanks for that. In terms of okay, so you found a few properties. Let's say you found one, two, like you're going big and you're starting, with three additional properties, for example. So how do you make them stand out? Because obviously you have other companies doing the same thing. You also have the hospitality. Um, the hospitality businesses, whether they are anywhere from, I don't know, bed and breakfasts, or any other like hotels or apart hotels or anyone else. So what's the core value? Is it just an issue of like trying to understand supply and demand and trying to understand whether there is enough space for an additional property in that location or multiple additional properties? Or is it a matter of just offering something that's better than the existing supply?
Yeah, it's a good question. My personal opinion is that, the market's getting so busy now. And again, I can only talk about the UK. I'm not going to pretend that I'm a professional in, the US market or, Southeast Asia. But in the UK, it's getting incredibly busy. There's a lot of people entering the space. I think a lot of people have got maybe some slightly unrealistic expectations of what's going to happen once they hit, upload to Airbnb. It's not like it was 5 years ago. And to be honest, the standard or the quality of properties, again, of that additional supply that's coming in is so high that I think that really the only way that you can consistently focus on maintaining occupancy really in this market, at least with who we serve, which is our contractor clients and our insurance relocation stays, is about building relationships. So it's about, being really busy with your marketing, building relationships direct with our suppliers, with our companies that we work with, and offering a really, really good service each and every time that we house their clients, right? Spending an extra few thousand on, really fancy furniture or those big pop-in feature walls. Yeah, you might get some additional bookings that way, but consistently for the long term, I think you've got to put in the hard work on building relationships. And then once you've built that relationship, you've built that trust, you've built that rapport, whether you've got that feature wall or not, they're going to come back to you time and time and time again. If you can offer them the convenience and take away some of that pain that they find in trying to secure really good, trustworthy, quality, clean accommodation, that's going to be the same every time. If you can remove that work for them, they're just going to come to you every single time. But you've got to put in the work, and that's not going to happen by just sitting back and waiting for Airbnb to push you up to the top of the listings, because there's just too many people doing it now.
Okay, that makes sense. And that directly connects to my next question, which is pricing. So obviously, there are companies that approach the same types of clients, and they're acting as agents where they will do the work, they will find the locations, they will book them, and so they basically ask as a they behave as a travel agency for businesses that manages all that. So how do you position your pricing in order for this strategy to work with businesses that have staff and teams that need to move and stay in different locations?
Yeah, I mean, again, it comes back to the supply, the increased supply, and you see this a lot spoken about now on social media and a lot of the property groups, that rates are down. If you're relying on the OTAs, what you'll find if you're not doing any additional marketing or relationship building is that you'll get a lot more inquiries, I think, than we used to. There used to be a lot more kind of instant book, but now you'll get inquiries where an employer might message and say, hey, I'm looking to book your place for a month. Can you do a better price? And a lot of the time, because people are starting to feel that, that kind of pressure, a lot of the time they'll say yes. And when that happens enough across a big enough area, then obviously, the rates can come down. So, we, again, coming back to the relationships and working on that and nurturing that and offering consistent quality service, and again, putting in the time on the marketing, a lot of cold calling, a lot of outreach, a lot of email marketing, really is the only way that, again, you can, charge a little bit more, because again, it's about offering the service. And it's only when you can continuously do that and they get to learn and believe and trust and depend on that service that you can say, look, you know what you're going to get with us, and this is what it's going to cost. And a lot of the time they're going to pay that because they know it's just going to be super convenient, easy. They know the process. They know what it was last time. It's going to be the same as it is this time. But if you're just relying on the OTAs, then you're going to feel that you're getting squeezed. So again, it comes back to all about being direct, and not relying on third-party people to pass us bookings. We've got to go out there and find them ourselves. But that strategy that you just touched on is a great thing to do. If you're in the space anyway and you're building those relationships, you should find that you're starting to receive leads and get booking requests more than what you can accommodate in your own properties. So then it gives you the opportunity to go and sell those to your network, and make an additional revenue stream, which is great.
Makes sense. Now, companies probably do not have the same level of seasonality, or seasonal fluctuations that the leisure market has. But do you see that certain industries have more seasonal fluctuation than others? How is that working?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a, you see this a lot on social media where people say, all right, you've got to start putting some aside. We're coming up to the winter months. Things are gonna come to a grinding halt. And we've never really agreed with that, because the contractor market doesn't start closing up because the weather draws in. Again, it's something that's massively dependent on the leisure market for sure. As soon as the winter starts to draw in the UK anyway, it comes to a pretty abrupt halt. Again, another reason to focus more on corporate and contractor travel, and the insurance relocation market, because it's just a year-round thing. It never really stops. But for those who are listening or watching who are kind of committed to that leisure market strategy, or I know a lot of people are kind of going into the luxury high-end serviced accommodation space, which is not something that I would ever consider, but I guess some people make it work. But for those who are doing kind of more middle of the road leisure market stuff, or those people who do find themselves in a position where, for whatever reason, the corporate market has slowed down in their area for the winter, then potentially what they can do is they could look at maybe putting that property out on, say, a 6-month AST contract, and try and get a 6-month, obviously lower rate but long-term booking in there to kind of cover the cost through the winter months. I know a lot of people do that, and in the UK, you can use sites like Rightmove or OpenRent or Zoopla, or Gumtree, where you can list your property, at least on OpenRent and Gumtree, direct, and they can contact you direct. There's a lot of people out there who need properties for 6 months, who are going through, house, chains or chain breaks, or, insurance bookings. So that might be a good way to kind of tackle that. But for us personally, we're open 365, 24/7 for the contractor market, and it seems to be pretty consistent. So.
Yeah, I actually know personally someone in Berlin who has been filling 5 properties simply through a Facebook group. for temporary accommodation, people going to Berlin to work on different projects with tech companies, and they just need for like 3 to 6 months an apartment. And he's been working, managing 5 properties just through that Facebook group. He's never paid a commission to any platform. So it's an impressive strategy. I'm not sure if someone can replicate this, but anyway.
Yeah. And again, Akis, a lot of what you're talking about and a lot of this success is all built on just relationships.
Yes.
If you can uncover just one stone, and that stone might lead to a huge contract. We've got a mentee that we're working with right now who's been really putting in the time, out along, full-time job. He's an accountant, but he's putting aside a couple of hours every day where he just calls companies, and he's been pushing really hard in Birmingham with the HS2 train line contract. And through speaking to this person that led to that person, that then to this person, and he's now one of the preferred suppliers of accommodation for all of the HS2 employees, which is going to be for 12 to 18 months. And we're talking about 40 or 50 guys that he can now go out and source for. So you just need to uncover that one rock, and it can lead to gold.
Excellent. Yeah, that's. But I think it comes back to what we were saying about skills and profile. So if you don't have the skills to do that, then you need to build those skills, because it takes a certain type of kind of like, it's not necessarily a personality, but you need to know how to approach larger companies or mid-sized companies to be able to secure those relationships. That makes perfect sense. So in terms of Airbnb, because obviously a lot of people are thinking just about Airbnb, as Airbnb being the place where you just put your listings and then magic happens, as you were saying earlier. So as you're working towards building those relationships or finding those growth opportunities or strategies or channels, how do you, what's the relationship with Airbnb? Is it more of a, you have it also on Airbnb just to fill some days where for some reason you had a cancellation or something else, or like, how do you approach Airbnb?
Yeah, 100%. We're definitely on Airbnb and Booking.com. You can't compete with their reach. Obviously, they're putting hundreds of millions of dollars every year into their ad spend. Everybody knows about them, and not just that, there's a huge amount of trust there. So we use them kind of as what we refer to as like a gate opener. So a lot of the time we'll meet those clients initially for the first time through Airbnb or Booking.com, and they'll come to us. They like, a lot of the time, the fact that they know they're dealing with a big brand. So when they're making their payments, it's just the way the world is, right? A lot of people now are suspicious about online activity. Everybody's a little bit worried, rightly so. And they know that if they're booking through them, that it's secure. And then once their clients are at the property and we can, get that FaceTime, build that relationship, make that communication, and then any kind of extensions and definitely any additional bookings after that will be coming direct. We never try to play this game that a lot of people do, where you get an inquiry through Airbnb and then you do everything you can to try and speak in code, or to try and get them off the site for that first time, because at the end of the day, they would never have found you a lot of the time if it wasn't for Airbnb anyway. So we've got no problem with them coming through there for the first time. Sometimes what we may try and do is, if we get an inquiry for, say, 6 months and the commission's going to be in the thousands, we might try and say, hey, why don't you book your first month, here, and once you get to the property, we can hopefully do you a better rate. And obviously, we'll take, let's say, 10% off of what they would have paid through the OTAs, so they can benefit as well. We can, make an additional 5%. So, but yeah, for sure, you cannot be in this business and not be on Airbnb and Booking.com, because that's who everybody goes to first.
And would you also go to additional platforms, or the go-to platforms would be just Airbnb and Booking.com?
Yeah, I mean, the more platforms, the better. The more eyes on your properties. The truth is, we might get a very occasional booking through Vrbo or through, TripAdvisor or Hotels.com or Orbitz, but it's very the only travelers that will ever get through Verbo might be Americans or Canadians, and the same for the other sites. In the UK, Airbnb and Booking.com, they're the two that you need to be on. Google Vacation Rentals might be, another one that's worth considering. But to be honest, Airbnb and Booking.com is like 95% of where all the traffic comes through.
Okay, that makes sense. And now, in terms of the competition itself, as you said earlier, lots of properties are being added to the market. Also, high quality properties. When you start out and you actually don't have those relationships, and it takes time, as we in every industry. It's not a property management thing. It's in every industry. It takes time to build those relationships. What's the typical process that you should use in order to get to that point, to the point where you have a sustainable flow of requests from those relationships? Like, aside from just listing it on Airbnb and Booking.com and reaching out to companies, how should you like, what sort of activity should you do in your first 18 months, let's say?
As far as trying to get bookings?
Yes, because it's a competitive marketplace.
Well, again, I think it's about bringing it back to basics, and this isn't a direct answer to the question, but I think it always needs to come back to making sure that you're sourcing the right property for the right target market at the beginning. Because if you do that, then I don't think you'll ever really have a problem with trying to get bookings. I think where people are struggling is, I can talk about this endlessly because it's all we see and hear about in the market today, is that people are doing courses, they're coming out, they're going, most of the time straight into the rent to rent market, and trying to get any property right now, because we've got this perfect storm of everybody trying to do rent to rent combined with a rental crisis. And again, I'm referring to the UK specifically. So as soon as a property comes on the market, there's 50 people, good applications that are going into agents. Okay. So you trying to secure that property on a corporate let to do rent to rent is almost impossible anyway. So then what happens is people start getting desperate and they get offered something finally, which for some reason couldn't quite get rented to the residential market. Most of the time it's because it's really tired, or there's something really funky about it, like it's got a massive lounge and a tiny, tiny kitchen, or it's got 5 bedrooms and 1 tiny bathroom. And they panic, and the agent says, "Hey, you remember you called me 3 months ago? I've got this property just came up. It's great. Do you want it?" And they'll grab it, right? And then they pour a load of money into it. They furnish it, so much money on it, put it on Airbnb, and then it's like, oh my God, nothing's happening. And it's not happening. It's not happening because the market's too busy, or, the economy's stopped turning. It's because the property just doesn't meet the people who are coming to that area. So then it's like, well, what do I do now? And really, people might say, you've got to call out to companies, and you've got to, one of the good ones that a lot of the training companies say is you've got to go to all the hotels and take pictures of the vans in the car park and then message them directly. And it's like, should we really have to be going to all these pain and all these problems to get bookings? It means that you took on a bad property because you didn't have the education and you didn't do the work at the beginning. So I think to answer your question is, do it right from the beginning, and you won't have to have 18 months of, what the hell is going on here? Agony. Yeah.
So this is very similar to what we hear from people that are joining the space with their own property. And because it's their own property and they already own it, they make the necessary investment to put it on the market. They have this perception around this property because they own it, that it's a good property, and then it's just crickets, and then depression, simply because it's impossible to make it work because it doesn't fit with any persona. There is no market for it, so they
it's a whole combination of things, right? It's this business is sold, like I said earlier, as this by a lot of the training companies quite unethically, that you can make a lot of money with very little investment. Just go and rent a property and put it on Airbnb and watch the money roll in. And the way that it's done as well on a lot of the training courses, things like, they'll fill the room with a lot of people who are very, very motivated, who are a lot of the time in a very hard position financially. And, one of their best performing students will get on the stage and talk about this 12-month, 6-figure contract to book in that they just secured. And all the people who are sitting in the room here is that this person rented a property for £2,000 a month and they just secured a 6-figure booking. Now, we know, because we're in the business, that what really happened was that a company contacted them and said, we need a place for 12 months. And this host has said, fantastic, my property's available, but they've only actually paid for 28 days, right? So they pay for that first month. And then a lot of the time when those contractors are in that property, the company most of the time will spend that whole time trying to search for a cheaper property to house them for the rest of the contract. So a lot of the time after that first month, they'll serve notice and they'll say, sorry, we're not paying the rest of the 11 months. We're moving out. And that happens, and that's fine, and you should be able to, then move more people in. But it's those kinds of selling strategies that make thousands of people every single month enter the space with these unrealistic ideas. So yeah, it's just, again, you don't know what you don't know. And that's what we try and do. We try and be ethical. We try and be genuine. We try and be honest and real about what the business is, what you have to do for success consistently to build a real business. But unfortunately, that's not the sexy stuff that sells. So it's a bit of an uphill swim, but we'll get there.
Makes sense. So, Alex, I think we covered a lot of different points. So, where should someone find you to learn more about your program, your services, and how you could help them?
Well, we've got a site that kind of lays out everything that we do. It's called airbnbconsultant.co. So you can go there and that should take you, and you should be able to find out all the information. Also, you can find me on Facebook, Alex Mannock. Message me there, or on Instagram, the Airbnb Nomads Podcast. You can see all of our podcast clips on there, and you can also message me through Instagram, and I'm also on LinkedIn.
Great. So we'll include all those links in the comments, the show notes of this video. So Alex, thanks very much for your time. I personally learned a lot, even though I work for Tokeet. There are a lot of strategies that we don't know because we serve the software side of things. So looking forward to our next conversation.
All right, Akis, I really appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me on, and I hope some of that was can help some people out there.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Akis. Take care.
Bye.